The trail looked harmless enough at the start, all pine needles and morning light. But by the second mile, I knew it was going to be a grinder. My pack felt heavier than when I'd hoisted it from the truck, straps digging into my shoulders like a stubborn mule refusing to let go. Behind me, I could already hear Jake muttering under his breath, the sound of his boots scuffing against the rocky dirt louder than it needed to be. He was in one of those moods where every step came with a complaint, and I braced myself for the miles ahead. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth and spruce, and somewhere to our right, a creek whispered over stones, tempting us with the promise of cold water. But we pressed on. The plan was ambitious. A long loop that would take us over 2 ridges before circling back toward camp the next day. On paper, it sounded like a test of stamina. In practice, it quickly turned into a test of patience. By the 4th mile, blisters were blooming. I could feel the hot sting in my heel, the kind that warns you early on that things will only get worse. Jake stopped to adjust his laces for the 3rd time, sighing loud enough for the birds to scatter. "Who even thought this was a good idea?" he asked, not for the first time. I didn't answer right away. The truth was, it had been my idea, and I was beginning to wonder if I'd made a mistake dragging him along. The pack was heavy, the sun was climbing, and we still hadn't reached the first ridge. But the woods were alive. The sharp call of a jay, the rustle of a squirrel darting through leaves, the rhythmic crunch of our boots on the trail. Despite the discomfort, there was something steadying in that sound, something that reminded me why I loved to push into the backcountry. Still, I could feel the tension building, the way it does when 2 people are carrying more weight than they bargained for, not just on their backs, but between them. And I had the uneasy sense that before the day was out, something was going to break. By midday, the sun was high enough to press down on us like a hand against the back of the neck. We stopped on a rocky outcrop for lunch. Packs dropped with twin groans, and the silence between us felt heavier than the gear we carried. I tore open a packet of jerky, stomachs. But there's something about being in the middle of the woods, no cars, no walls, no easy escape, that strips away the polite layers. What you're left with is raw, sometimes ugly, sometimes honest. After lunch, we pushed on, each step a negotiation between willpower and exhaustion. My blister burned hotter with every mile, and Jake started dragging behind, cursing under his breath when the trail narrowed or when roots tripped his boots. I offered to trade packs for a while. His was lighter, but I figured the gesture might ease things. Instead, he snapped, "I don't need your pity." That stung more than I wanted to admit. For the first time, I thought about turning back, scrapping the loop, and chalking the trip up to bad judgment. But pride can be as heavy as any pack, and neither of us wanted to be the one to suggest quitting. By the time we reached a clearing near a shallow stream, the tension had grown thick enough to choke on. We dropped our packs again, this time with less care, and sat in silence, dunking our hands in the cold water. The stream bubbled cheerfully as if mocking us, as if to say, "You chose this, now see it through." And that's when Jake said something that cut through the heat and fatigue like a blade. "You know, sometimes I think you drag me out here just to prove you're tougher than me." I looked at him, the water dripping from my fingers, and realised this hike was about more than sore feet or steep climbs. Something deeper was gnawing at him, and the trail had just brought it to the surface. The words hung between us, heavier than the packs lying in the dirt. I let them sit there, carried off a little by the sound of the stream, until silence turned awkward and tight. Finally, I asked, "Is that really what you think?" Jake didn't look at me. He was bent over, unlacing one boot, rubbing at his swollen foot. His jaw worked like he was chewing on something bitter. "Feels like it sometimes," he said at last. "Every trip we take, it's always about going farther, pushing harder. You don't listen when I say I'm done. You just push." It hit me then. This wasn't just about today's ridge. This was years of hikes, canoe trips, long weekends spent day. The woods pressed close around us, the air thick with pine sap and heat. A hawk circled overhead, its shadow slipping across the clearing. I wanted to say something that would mend the crack opening between us, but nothing seemed right. So, instead, I suggested we camp early. "Forget the loop," I said. "Let's just stop here, set up by the stream. We've got plenty of daylight left. Tomorrow, we'll see how we feel." Jake studied me for a long moment, as if weighing whether I meant it. Then he nodded, shoulders slumping with relief. He pulled his other boot off and dangled his feet in the cold stream, sighing like a man who'd just set down the world. For a little while, the tension eased. We gathered water, pitched the tent under a cluster of spruce, and even managed to laugh when Jake nearly dropped our dinner pot into the stream. But under it all, the words still lingered. About proving things, about pushing too hard. And as the shadows lengthened, and the forest filled with the evening chorus of crickets and thrushes, I couldn't shake the thought that maybe this trip wasn't about endurance at all. Maybe it was about something far more fragile. The balance between friendship and pride, and whether it could survive the weight of both packs combined. As dusk settled over the clearing, the forest changed its tune. The day's hum of insects softened, replaced by the low calls of nightbirds and the steady rush of the stream. Our little fire snapped and popped, casting jittering shadows against the trunks of the spruce. Jake sat across from me, poking at the flames with a stick, and I could see the weight still hanging on him, even though his boots were off and his feet wrapped in fresh bandages. Dinner was simple: rice and beans, the kind of meal that fills your belly without asking for compliments. We ate in near silence, the firelight flickering in Jake's tired eyes. At one point he muttered, "Never thought I'd be this glad for plain old rice." And I chuckled, but it felt like a laugh meant more to bridge the gap than because the words were funny. Afterward, we leaned back against our packs and listened to the night, about the pride in reaching summits without really noticing if anyone else wanted to climb that high. "Maybe I forget," I admitted, "that the trail isn't the same for everyone. What feels like a challenge to me might feel like punishment to someone else." That seemed to land. Jake finally looked up, his face softer in the glow. "I don't want to quit these trips. I just don't want to feel like I'm slowing you down all the time." We sat with that for a while, listening to the hiss of the stream and the occasional rustle in the undergrowth. Coyotes howled somewhere far off, their voices drifting across the ridges like echoes of some older truth. Out here, the world didn't care about pride or pace. It cared about survival, about balance, about knowing when to push and when to rest. As the fire burned low and the chill of night crept closer, I felt something shift between us. The anger had drained away, replaced by something quieter, more honest. Maybe tomorrow the trail would test us again. But tonight, in the company of firelight and stars, it felt like we'd managed to set down more than just the weight of our packs. We woke to the sound of the stream and the faint chatter of chickadees. The night's chill still clung to the air, our breath rising in pale wisps as we crawled from the tent. My back ached from the hard ground, and my blister had stiffened overnight. But for the first time since we'd set out, I didn't mind. There was something steadying about the new day, the kind of calm that only comes after you've been through the rough patch and found yourself still standing. Jake moved slower than usual, but his face carried less tension. He filled his mug with water from the stream, sipping like a man who knew the value of something simple. "We don't have to finish the loop," he said after a while, voice even. "Could just retrace back to the truck. Shorter, easier. No shame in that. For a moment, pride nudged at me, whispering that we should press on, finish what we started. But then I remembered last night, the way the firelight had softened the edge between us, the honesty in his voice when he'd said he didn't want to feel like dead weight. The hike wasn't about the loop anymore, it was about us. And the moment when Jake nearly lost the pot in the stream. The trail still tested us, with steep grades and rocky stretches, but the silence that had been heavy yesterday now felt companionable. By the time we reached the truck, sweat streaking our shirts and dust caked on our boots, we were too tired to gloat or complain. We just dropped the packs with twin sighs, looked at each other, and laughed. A short, genuine laugh that carried relief and a bit of pride all the same. Driving away, I kept glancing back at the ridge in the rearview mirror, the line of trees silhouetted against the sky. The trail hadn't given us what we expected, but maybe that was the point. Out there, stripped of comfort and forced to carry more than we wanted, we'd found something harder to earn than miles, a reminder that endurance isn't just about sore feet and heavy packs. Sometimes it's about listening, slowing down, and walking at a pace that keeps you together. And I reckon that's the kind of lesson you don't forget, no matter how many trails lie ahead.